we prayed very hard. I saw sweat coming off your brow as you prayed to become competent in the 6 perfections. What is the last line? I will practice the 6 perfections. Beads of sweat breaking out on your forehead in the hard work that you are doing to practice the 6 perfections. Even saying, I will practice the 6 perfections, is a kind of unbreakable vow. Now you all in the circle of unbreakable vow, huh? Like that. Wouldn't that be great? And I noticed that not everyone broke into a sweat. Okay, nobody broke into a sweat. And that's okay, because we still have not fully understood what are the 6 perfections that in your daily practice 3 times and during your practice of your sadhana, perhaps many times during the day, that you recall the refuge vows and your promise to practice the 6 perfections. And so we can't say that it's for nothing, that we must think that there would be a kind of cumulative interest, minimum, that a cumulative curiosity. What are these 6 perfections? And why am I promising to do that? And anyway, I'm Buddhist, so I'll say, who am I anyway? Huh? Like that. This is a joke. And so we want to simultaneously discover the unreality of the self, and as well as make promises using the illusory self that we don't have, and understanding the 6 perfections. And so if we were lesser kinds of people, that we would dismiss our anticipation of the practice of the 6 perfections, or our vow to do that, by saying that the ultimate unreality of all phenomena supersedes any vow that I might take to practice the 6 perfections. So there, let's have another beer, huh? Like that. And so what they call self-satisfaction, smug self-satisfaction, replaces our actual anticipation of the vow. You know, great Chenrezi, the Buddha of compassion, in his bodhisattva form, gained the full vision of the scope of the issues that plague living beings, that the amount of suffering was so tremendous. And although he had worked for a very long time, that the amount of the suffering that remained with living beings was so tremendous that the only thing he could do was cry, you know? And so a great Chenrezi finally discovered the vow. He found the precursor, actually, of the vow, which was understanding the scope of the problem. That remains for us to discover the scope of the problems. Now, if we really understood, if we held the vastness of our own nature, our capacity to hold the understanding of the vastness of the problem, that I think we too would cry a lot. And there are many people, kind-hearted people in the West, on a regular basis, ask me, how is it possible to tolerate the sufferings of living beings? That when I think about, in many different ways they say this, when I think about the suffering in the world, I can't stand it. I can't stand it. But this is not the vow. This is saying, this is impossible, so I'm not going to try. This is not the vow of Chenrezi. Chenrezi cried and cried and cried, and out of his broken heart, he discovered his capacity to accomplish the vow, but it wasn't done by himself alone. That what broke in him with the floodgate of tears, this great bodhisattva, great being, was, they say, born of the tears came two forms of Tara, etc., who said, yes, I'll help you. Well, this sounds very sweet, you know? This sounds like a good cooperative behavior, but it's not like that. That the tears and the additional strength, Chenrezi discovered that he was not the one. The very thing which I have been telling you, and many of you for many years now, that you are not the one. That we can discover, we can uncover deeper and deeper levels of understanding that we are not the one. And in that way, we are able to find new forms of strength. Even you look, for those of you who have been practicing now for a number of years, if you look at yourself, if you remember the way you used to be 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, etc., that you would say, I could never have done the things that I do now. I could never have done the prayers and the meditations that I do now with the convictions that I hold in my capacity back then. That there is something that has happened to me over time that has made me more capable, even before the Enlightenment experience. That you have become more capable of greater understanding and greater capacity to help others. Isn't that so? And so we rely on ourselves to act in accordance with our capacity which we have developed. Isn't that so? It would be a shame to think we have to go back to zero every time. That we, in fact, have become capable. We have become capable. And we have become capable. And so did Chenrezi. And so did Chenrezi. Bodhisattva Chenrezi, post-enlightenment Bodhisattva Chenrezi, knew that he could rely on his own good qualities and his own development, his own knowledge, his own experience to be able to help others. Just like you. And Chenrezi found his wall just like you. And it may be a shift of your own awareness on a particular day that has caused you to falter and become deficient, to become weakened in your vows, to become weakened in your resolve. And what do? Chenrezi cried until his heart broke open. That we have resources as well. And this leads into our discussion this evening about the next phase of the 6 transcendent perfections, which is transcendent discipline. Transcendent discipline. We're on page 238 at the bottom, and we're going to look at it in a number of different ways. I don't know how much time we have here, but we're going to start. I read from Words of My Perfect Teacher by Patru Rinpoche, the great iconoclast. You know, Patru Rinpoche may have been the role model and for a number of iconoclastic wisdom beings of the present time. You know, some kind of scary wisdom beings, even in the West. Who knows? Maybe they're reincarnations of Patrul Rinpoche. Anyway, never mind that. Transcendent discipline consists of avoiding negative actions, undertaking positive actions, and bringing benefit to others. And we go on with Patrul Rinpoche's point that he is making. Avoiding negative actions, this means rejecting like poison all 10 negative actions of body, speech, and mind that are not directed toward the benefit of others. And undertaking positive actions, this means always creating as many sources of good for the future as possible by always doing whatever positive actions you can, regardless of how insignificant they may seem. Just a moment, I just want to go back here. As the common saying goes, positive actions just happen. While our mouths or hands are free, negative actions, when we move around or sit. Only by always checking with great mindfulness, vigilance, and care, and by trying hard to do good and refrain from evil, can you avoid committing many serious negative actions, even while simply amusing yourself. Okay. So, what Patrul Rinpoche is telling us is rather common advice, important, but common advice to all Buddhists to avoid the 10 non-virtuous actions of killing, stealing, etc., etc. And by the avoidance of those negative actions, that what remains, if you avoid all negative actions, whatever you do will be positive. This is the nickel version of 10 non-virtues, 10 virtues, like that, which I've given teachings on. If you're interested, you could look at. However, what I'm more interested in talking about is a continuation of the discussion which we had at Joyful Path going back about a month or so ago, which was the ethical underpinnings. Now, these ethical underpinnings are the actual actions which we are indulging in. In other words, at any time of the day or night, that we have a tremendous amount of influences pressing in upon us to behave in accordance with one type of model or another. Isn't that so? That we have, for example, some kind of physical ill, which makes us crabby. You know? True? And so someone says hello, and our physical unwell being would like to rebuke them sharply or to speak roughly, because that influence of our illness. And we may, on the other hand, have recently imbibed a large amount of alcohol. We're going to say that as an influence. And so someone says, hello, how are you? And you might accidentally fall all over them, actually tripping, and kiss them on both cheeks and tell them how much you love them. all of which is completely mindless, huh? Like that. And then proceed to vomit all over them or something like that. So, or you may have just come away from a Dharma lecture. And someone says, "How are you?" And you might have a completely different answer. Or you may have come from seeing a friend in the hospital who has just passed away. And so again, someone says, "How are you?" And you have a completely different answer. And so we are constantly being massaged, I'm going to say, by influences which we create or others have created, or out of compassion we expose ourselves, or by adventitious situation, perhaps such as becoming ill, that it wasn't my fault, it wasn't anybody's fault. And so this becomes who we are, is our response to the influences which we happen to be experiencing either internally or externally, not even talking about karma. We don't even have to talk about karmic influences. We have enough influences coming to us in our daily life that we can just simply go with the flow. And whatever is happening at that moment, that's what we're reactive to. So this not as helpful if we want to have a self-directed life. And so, in our Buddhist meditations, in our contemplations and cogitations, or simply driving down the road, something strikes you like a thunderbolt and you think, hey, I'm not going to do that kind of thing anymore. I'm going to be this different person. I'm going to be different from now on. I think everyone has said this, huh? And so we try to tie that good thought and hang on to it by tying it to something inside us. What is that thing called? I don't know. What is it called? What do you think? Our root mind? Our sense of ethical proportion? Our own ethics? How about if we say that we tie that good determination to our ethics? And when we do that, we touch something inside us that says, I will refrain from this. This is my personal vow. This behavior I will refrain from. And so I am going to change my mind. This is the value of ethics, is that we, by our own willpower, even though in the past we have not been capable of it, by our own willpower, we decide we are going to change. And we promise our own ethical structure that we are going to have a new beginning from that moment. And then it's like, it's like, in a way, it's sort of like a punchline of a joke. That someone tell a joke, but the people don't laugh immediately. They have to kind of think about it, and then they laugh. And so someone who's a very good joke teller, they wait for the beat. They have a beat that goes on. 1, 2, 3, and then the laugh comes. Huh? True? Like that? And so like that, if we are serious, we make this decision, then we don't just rush off and do something else, but we wait for the, I'm going to call it wait for the beat. And while that is sinking in, we don't do anything. Because what's happening is that this is shifting other things inside. That every high quality ethical decision that you make changes something else inside you. And that means that the domino effect or the repercussions of your decisions, your ethical decisions, have an effect on how your other perceptions or your other choices are comfortable in expressing themselves. Now I say it that way because this hinges very much on what Patrul Rinpoche means, and what I would think means by discipline, means that you have both of these ideas inside you. You have your ethical structure, which you have made a change, and yet without having a complete change, that there is a time period when you are challenged in your own ethical structure. Now, I think whole life passes this way for people who have strong ethics. I think whole life you are challenged in your discipline. That you have to increase your capacity. You have to shift more awareness to the ethical underpinnings, which are positive, and make them strong, give them what they call like little strength building exercises. I have to tell a story. We were at St. Vinny's today, like that. Everybody here in this area knows St. Vincent de Paul secondhand store. And we were wandering around and looking for different bedding things and this and that, which were needed for the hospice and retreat center. And just sort of out of the corner of my eye, there were three young people in their 20s who were, one young man had found a piece of sports equipment, which was a strength building ratchet thing that made some kind of a sound, and he would go and then push it out again, while his other two friends watched him in great admiration that he was capable of this amount of strength. And they all standing close around, and this piece of machinery was not, this equipment was not very large. And so as he was doing this, they were saying, "Oh, that looks so hard to do. That appears so difficult. How can you do that?" And what did he do? He speeded up. And as I walked away smiling, he was continuing to ratchet this machine and to display his capacity for this. And in fact, showing them how easy it was for him. And so we all recognize situations that we've been in where we are displaying our self-discipline, and we are either admired, or we are laughed at, or people wonder what the heck we are doing. And it causes something to rise up inside, and somehow this strengthens our self-discipline. And for some people, in fact, before, they weren't sure whether the 10 non-virtues and the 10 virtues were worth doing. It just seems so innocuous. It doesn't seem related to reality. But when we are questioned in our values, or when we are admired in our values, it hardly matters. When it's attention brought to our strength of mind, that we think, hey, I'm pretty good, aren't I? I'm getting stronger. I'm getting better at this. And this actually, the Tibetan Geshes are considered to be a pretty stubborn lot. Austere behavior and strict adherence to the principles of right conduct. I mean, they really more strict than anybody on the face of the earth, annoyingly so. When I was in my just previous life, when I was Geshe, I also like that. Now I can say it because now I can say it with a little distance like that. But stubborn, very stubborn. And these seem to be hallmarks of Geshe training, especially Kadampa, from the old Kadampa Geshe tradition, that we have certain standards of stubbornness which must be upheld. But in your ethical system, in your own personal ethics, that we could name many aspects of your own personal ethics that you unbelievably stubborn about. That if someone challenges you in your ethics, you'll rise up like a tiger to promote wellness and health, or what you feel is the correct mindset. And like that our ethical structure is what we are directly looking at when we are challenged. That we have a gaze which sees the outer world, and then our inner eyes are viewing our internal environment and choosing which influences we wish to have with us, to stand beside us. And the hallmark of someone who has a great deal of discipline is someone who makes decisions which influences they want to have standing beside them, as opposed to which influences are coming naturally. If everything came easily to you, if no one ever what they say, like left $100 on a table and walked away, like that. I'm not saying anyone here would take the $100, but if no one ever left money hanging around, if no one ever had a hard ethical decision that you had to make, that if this world, let me say it this way, if this was a perfect world, ethics would not be needed at all. That we would have no challenges to our discipline, that we would have nothing. We would have nothing that we needed to lean against in order to make us strong. And so you see many times people who have lives of great ease, everything just goes well for them. Everything is sort of laid out for them. They never had to struggle for anything. They never had to want for anything. That it is not easy. It is not easy for people like that to have a strong ethical system, because they've never been challenged. They've never had to be challenged. They've never had to make decisions where they may not have been the winner. Someone who has things very easy always assumes that they will be the winner, in the outcome of that situation. Isn't that so? And when they inadvertently are not, then they very often have a breakdown in their, how you would call it, in their reaction, huh? In their composure, in their reactions to their world. And so this to me is discipline. That having and developing a moral structure or an ethical structure of how we are going to react, and then holding our gaze to our ethical structure while we are gazing at the world and seeing the situation and the milieu that we're involved in, makes us capable of dealing with daily life and dealing with whatever comes to us. Makes sense? And so we have, as a beginning, that we develop mindfulness. That mindfulness is the root of discipline, because if you do not have an alert state to your own interactions with the world, that situations will allow you to be caught up, and you will not be able to get out of situations easily. You will regularly paint yourself into an ethical corner where you are trapped by your own words and by your own influences that you have allowed to overcome you because it was the easy way to do, because you were mindless. However, with a strong discipline and ethical structure, that you will always be vigilant for your own behavior. You know, the downside of this is that many people who have strong discipline feel that it is others that need to be disciplined first. And then once they have tamed everyone around them, then they then can exist peacefully, go with the flow, because everyone is under control. This is another way that we, this sort of like dealing with others in a kind of classroom discipline situation. In other words, the teacher feels that they cannot teach while the children are all unruly. And so they make all of the children behave and hold their hands quietly, and in that way the teacher can speak and be heard. This is one form of discipline, isn't that so? But this very often carries over into families, where the person a person would say that I can't meditate until everybody is perfectly quiet, or I can't get along with this person, and so that person has to be out of my sight. And in fact, you control the entire environment, and then you feel comfortable. This is not discipline. This is not discipline. Instead, you should be able to stand on the corner of 42nd Street and Times Square, and your mind should be composed. That it doesn't matter what people are doing around you. That discipline allows you to be peaceful and to be virtuous wherever you go, and you don't need to fix everyone around you. So somewhere between these two extremes is where you probably are. That you would want what they call a modicum of a peace and quiet in the home, and the rest of it you will try to pick up and deal with it yourself. True? However, if we look at examples such as Chenrezi exposed himself to the full onslaught of the delusions. You know, when this story is told, it's always said the sufferings of living beings. But what does that really mean? Is that he was experiencing the full delusions of all living beings. You know? This would be like stepping into an uncontrolled insane asylum. People shouting, hurting each other, ripping at their clothes, writhing on the floor, exhibiting their delusions without any regard, without any control at all. This is what Chenrezi opened himself, herself to. This is the full extent of the suffering, is the full exposure to the delusions of all living beings. Now you know what the suffering means? That we want to think that the suffering of living beings would be a kind of distillation, a kind of removing from the causes of suffering, not the delusions, not the anger, not the harm that living beings, but to stand amongst the harm that living beings are perpetrating on themselves needlessly. This is the suffering of living beings. You know, most Buddhists, we keep it very simple. And we say, may all sentient beings end suffering, end suffering. But what does that really mean? Maybe you're not ready to do what Chenrezi did. And so gradually we strengthen ourselves in our capacity to endure helping others in the midst of their delusions without feeling harmed ourselves. But in fact, the attitude that Chenrezi held was seeing perfection itself in its suffering form, in its suffering form. Could there be anything worse? It would be like seeing someone who is so intelligent, so competent, who has taken a drug that has made them insane. And they writhing on the floor and babbling. How would you feel? You would look at them and you could think, how could you have done that to yourself? How could you have destroyed your potential? There were things that you could have done, and now you have to be tied down. This is the suffering of living beings, not just how sad they might be, how sick they might be, but having painted themselves into a corner where the only logical conclusion in their own minds is suffering and a loss of their potential, a loss of their evolutionary potential. And so, with a broken heart, Chenrezi opened himself to a new level of understanding and more, and he became part of a greater cooperative element, and that is the point I want to make. That no longer did Chenrezi hold universal responsibility. That he became absorbed into a higher life form. You think it was tears, but it actually a breaking open. It was a kind of new enlightenment, I'm going to say, higher level enlightenment. And he became capable. But it wasn't him alone. that Chenrezi at that time lost his name. He no longer Chenrezi the Bodhisattva, but he Chenrezi, part of enlightened society, who works on these issues in a much different way. He's on his way to becoming a Buddha-level being. So anyway, these things get very difficult to understand. I'm not going to go on and on. However, coming back to your issues regarding discipline, self-discipline, and the 10 virtues and non-virtues, and how we approach it with our own ethical system, is that when we reach into our valued ethical system, that in a way, we and our ethical system are like two different people. We could say that our ethical system is the better part of us. And so when we can't rely because maybe we had too much to drink or too much to smoke, like that, woo, and we think, oh God, please help me. And who comes to your rescue but your own ethical system? And you retreat from the influences, and you regard your ethical system as your mast that you hold to. You know, sometimes we are presented with almost impossible, seductive influences. You're going to be rich, you're going to be famous. And who we become at the time of those seductive influences is where your strength of character lies. Now, I'm not saying to be rich and to be famous is wrong. I think it would be terrific. I would be so happy to see all of you rich and famous, as long as you still had time to meditate, like that. But should we have to pay for fame and money in ways that are antithetical to our own values, then it becomes a decision for your self-discipline. So the second point, the third point, is bringing benefit to others. Patrul Rinpoche again says, wish I had a clock, but anyway, as we have already seen, when you are totally free of wanting anything for yourself, thank you. Thank you. When you are totally free of wanting anything for yourself, the time will have come for you to work directly for the benefit of others, using the 4 ways of attracting beings. But as a beginner, the way to bring benefit to others is to dedicate to the benefit of all beings all the practice you do while training and undertaking positive actions and avoiding negative ones. You know, part of our discussion that I felt was extremely valuable, that was a kind of a closed group, but I'm going to talk a little bit about it, was the miracle of the increased ethical values of the modern world. You know, most people feel that the ethics of this modern world have really gone downhill. Isn't that so? But actually, when you begin to examine it, that we can see that over time, that the ethical rules have increased. For example, the treatment of human beings, the treatment of soldiers, the treatment of the mentally ill, the treatment of those who have certain kinds of dread diseases, of people who are not of the same ethnic or racial as the one who is deciding. That we have even how many people, even in wartime, that the care for soldiers is not just for care of the soldiers for our side, but we are also ethically bound to treat and care for the soldiers of the other side when they are captured. And so the regard for human life has actually increased. And the regard for the lives of living creatures, such as sea life and animal life, insect life, has actually increased, if we think about it. And this has only happened, and we discussed at great length, by the individuals who had such high standards and karmic capacity for being able to influence others, that laws were enacted. And the world changed for the better due to the ethical actions and those who gathered together to promote these new ethical standards. And the reason why we feel we have less ethical standards is because these important ethical rules are broken regularly. True? And these, which by the way didn't exist before, no one was bound by these ethical rules, but now society binds everyone to these ethical rules, and when they are broken, that the individuals have to be brought to justice. They have to come into alignment, they have to pay for their misdeeds, and they have to change. If these ethical structures were unknown, then anybody could do whatever they wish to. If we look at the power of kings in the ancient days, kings could arbitrarily imprison and even kill whoever they pleased. They had no ethical boundaries at all. And that's what they did. That there were very few benevolent kings. This is why, even in early Buddhism, that it was prayed that kings would be benevolent and that they would rule their people well. There wouldn't have been any need to say that if everything was going well. But it wasn't. That it was terrible times, that people took advantage of others, that they considered most people were inferior, and there were only a few superior. And those who were superior could do anything they wanted to those who were inferior. And the world isn't like that anymore. And the watchdogs of the ethically challenged have increased over the years. And we see a tremendous upsurge right at this time, that we are seeing a tremendous indignation here in the United States and in various parts of the world, where people are saying, hey, this is wrong. What you're doing is wrong. You can't just mindlessly accumulate all of this money. It's not fair. This does not belong to you. That you took, we're the ones who have given you the money and we have gotten no benefit. I'm just briefly, for the purpose of the future, when people have no idea what I'm talking about here. In this Occupy Wall Street and many other places. And people are indignant. They feel that their learned cultural, ethical system has been disrespected. True? And now we see where it's going to go. Will this ethical structure mean, like 1917 in Russia, like the French Revolution? What will happen next? Will we become the indignant? Will we become the new oppressors? Or will something come out of this that will be a correction of the ethical structure? Or has our ethical structure of this world been ahead of its time? Maybe we are not ready to have such a strict ethical structure when most of the people can't follow it. These are questions that our individual ethical structure has ramifications in the larger ethical structure of our society. We are the creators of society, but not that fast. Society doesn't move that fast. Have we asked society too much? Have we not been able to control the excesses, which seems to be the key of these riots and occupations? I don't think they're riots yet, but I hope not. That have we not been able to control and prevent people from abusing the ethical system? So these are some of the ramifications of our own personal ethical system. However, the beauty of individuality is that you can have a stronger ethical system than society is prepared to go along with. In other words, you can hold high standards for your own behavior without necessarily everyone else complying with you. And this is how we change, that we become ethically sound and reasonable, that our common sense becomes less intensely about me and more about us. And when our ideas about what is right and what is wrong, when we feel this us arising in us, that we must be careful that we not push people further or faster than they are capable of changing, or there will be war. And that's what war is about. So our own ethical system perhaps needs a little bit more repair before we are ready to go to war for righteousness, huh? Like that. And this important benefit that our ethical structure has to move from us as, for example, us being our family or us being our community, to having greater and greater sensations, not just intellectual understanding of who we are, but an energetic letting down of the barriers between ourselves and others. So much so that we no longer need to shift benefit to us, that we no longer need to shift benefit to us as individuals, but that we see the benefit that comes having a larger scope of benefit. And this means that grasping and clinging to the selfish needs of ourself end. We think that's impossible right now. We think yesterday, was it yesterday or day before yesterday, in our all-day intensive, and talking about generosity, that I challenged each person there to mentally think of an object which they would never, ever be able to give up. An object that they owned, that they would never be able to give away. And I challenged them to find that object and to mentally give it to the person seated next to them without regard for what that person was going to do with it. And like this greater giving, that there is a transcendent form of discipline which arises in us when the human body and the human mind are too small to contain our virtue. And our virtue bursts forth from us. Our virtue bursts forth from us in a display of caring and compassion, which transforms us forever. That we find selfishness to be utter foolishness and doesn't even make sense anymore. And although we can remain as a human being, that we don't have an understanding of the value of selfishness or the value of self-cherishing. Somehow, something happens and self-cherishing just doesn't make sense anymore. And when that happens, this brings new resources for discipline, for self-discipline, that are not harsh, but it's a joyous form of discipline, practicing the 10 virtues. And the 10 non-virtues just don't make sense. That they're no longer practiced because one has transcended. And this transcendent form of ethics resonates with higher being. It resonates with the values of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And we sing the same songs. We rejoice at the same things. And we come into we awaken to new levels of highly cooperative being. In this way, I say, that on the interior and in enlightened society, that we have no separate names. We have no separate names. And this is not a loss. It is a gain. It is a higher gain. And so our discipline, which has evolved from a challenge to our own lifestyle. You know, many people who are beginning Buddhists worry that the kind of job that they hold, that they are expected to have certain unethical attitudes. They're supposed to give favor here, and they're supposed to be disrespectful here. They're supposed to hold certain judgments against others. And they read the Buddhist scriptures and they think, I don't want to do that. I don't want to see these people as less valuable and those people as more valuable. And they want their employer to explain again and again, why is it that we are disrespecting this group of people? Could you tell me again why that is so? And sometimes they find themselves without jobs. Those who know that's going to happen remain challenged in their, they remain, what they call conflicted in their values when they are expected to behave in a certain way which is antithetical to their new Buddhist values. I promise you that eventually it will all work out, and please work on your own system of values before you start challenging the values of others or challenging the values of society. This is the first thing that new Buddhists want to do, is that they want to change the way everybody is doing things, or they want to be the authority, the moral authority of a certain company, etc. So be careful, and remember that your strength and your moral character does not even have to be spoken in order to have an influence on your environment. So these things will have to depend on a lot of different factors. Naturally, people who are what they call wealthy from generations have more choices, as they say. And most people feel that the employment that they have, that they would be sorry if they lost their weekly or monthly income. And so there's that you remain in a kind of challenging situation until you are, until for a number of different reasons, that you arise from that, perhaps what you consider to be oppression, and that you have more choices, or that you are, even now, many of you, in positions to be able to influence others in a very positive way as part of your work, that many of you are teachers, and you are therapists, and you are guides, and different kinds of healers, and through your own through your own permissions, due to the kind of work that you are doing, that you are presently able to very nicely display valuable and positive influences to others. And like that, people who are spiritually minded wish to be surrounded by other spiritually minded people. Isn't that so? That you want to be influenced by them, that you want them to stand close around you, and to support your ethical standards. And in the same way, you moving away from your spiritual sangha, your spiritual friends, and you are in an environment which is, you might consider not very spiritual, that you can have that kind of influence even in a non-spiritual environment without directly challenging the structure of that business, or the structure of that school, or the structure of that situation. They don't have to change. You are the one that has to change. And in that way, work hard, practice well, and enjoy the challenge. And really, it's an awful lot of fun.